Welcome to the Joanne Averson podcast. Today I'm going to answer a question that was sent to me by somebody in program Myofascial Magic in Action, because my answers came through as awarenesses that I think make a difference to all of us, whatever modality we're in and whatever movement practice we do. So I'm sharing it with you. Here's the question. Why does MMIA make me feel better when I'm just doing a few movements a day? I know this feeling of well-being has been growing since I started, but I can't account for it. Is it the community? Is it the sequences? Is it following you? Or is it just your positive thinking that's infectious? Now, I found that intriguing because I don't think of myself necessarily as a positive thinker per se. So I'm going to answer this question, 3 distinctions. The first distinction I'm going to explain is about challenge. The second part of my response is about courage. And the third part of my response is about care. And I think these are relevant whatever your practice. So I'm sharing this with the person that asked the question, but I think you might find it applies to you for whatever you're doing too. So let's see. I always welcome your responses. So the first thing is really about challenge. And I think it really works for us to challenge ourselves. But we take challenge in our culture as being huge, such as running a marathon or cycling X miles at the weekend, like a weekend warrior. Or it's as if we haven't really done anything. And I know from my many experiences as a manual therapist that when I ask people what their movement practice is, they very rarely share their everyday movements. They talk about the movement events in their life and the level of achievement within those events is their challenge. So it's so many classes a week or so many levels that they've reached in the gym. It's all about this kind of big boot camp challenge to raise their game. Now, what's missing is that I'm not entirely sure that what we're talking about here is necessarily a positive thing. And this isn't about positive thinking per se, that whatever anybody asks, I'm always going to put a positive spin on it. And to everything we do, we know that in the universe, at a general level, at an energetic level, there's always an equal and opposite force to everything that happens. So for me, just going out there and being positive and meeting challenges at the highest level has a consequence. And for many of us, a huge challenge is getting through the day without being completely drained and exhausted, without having got upset ourselves or without having got angry with anybody else, and just simply managing. Now, whatever you are, whether you're a mother or a father or a brother or a sister or a friend or a colleague, you have to interact with other people and you have to meet all of their micro concerns on a daily basis. And that can be something of a marathon. And I think sometimes we think of physical challenges as being these standards of blocks that we have to maintain. And there's a different way of looking at it. There's a sense of well-being that we can find on the inside that has a quietness to it, that's not about achieving a challenge, but rather being present to the body that we're in. And the beauty of working with micro movements is that we're not coming from what's missing. We're not coming from the idea that it's wrong not to do something and right to do it. We're not coming from that polarity of my way's right, your way's wrong. This is better, that is worse. Studying the human body has been a challenge for me over the years because we've inherited what I call the spell that we are biomechanical. And so that gives us this idea that we can switch ourselves on and switch ourselves off. And like we're driving a car, we can push it to its limits or underuse it. We've got these categories: positive, negative, right, wrong, good, bad. And what we're doing here, what we're doing in MMIA, is sort of recognizing all that, but not getting caught up in what's wrong with us. Where we come from originally is the knowledge that the human body self-organizes and that each person is the architect that self-organized their own architecture in order to express themselves as the architect in whichever way they do. And if we can know what that is, I think the bigger challenge is being still and quiet and giving ourselves permission for nanoseconds a day, maybe 2 or 3 times a day, just pausing and taking a breath and asking, what am I doing here? Wow, I found that really challenging. Or I found that really difficult. Or I found that really easy. And just feeling that feeling, because you're feeling it. And then maybe taking 5 minutes out to do some micro movement medicine and taking a breath and thinking, oh gosh, look, I did that really well to the right, but I didn't do it so well to the left. That's interesting. And what I think happens brings us into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is courage. I think it takes courage to listen to ourselves and give ourselves a very simple, very low-key challenge and have the courage to just do that over time. Just do that over time. Now, I totally appreciate we've grown up in a culture where just do it is a slogan that we know belongs to Nike and implies athletic performance, warrior level completion of a race, competitive high output and achievement registered by the quantity of miles covered or the strokes per length or strides per mile, and all these quantitative database pieces of information of how we're performing. And actually it takes courage, and I think it's essential, to sit back with ourselves for a moment and look at what it takes to do everyday life without those great big huge challenges in them, but with this very simple context of time for self-awareness. That doesn't mean time for self-indulgence. That doesn't mean sitting on a pity pot thinking what's wrong in your life. I don't mean that. What I'm talking about is the kind of courage to say, I've woken up. I'm going to have a little yawning stretch. I'm going to do my little reset, and I'm going to get on my mat or on my floor or somewhere standing or little walk and just do something small. Do something micro. And micro feed the tissue with something that it already knows. It's so reassuring. And I think of my mother. My mother's a very elegant woman. She always looks lovely when she gets up in the morning. The first thing she does, she's 85, She lives in a care home. First thing she does every single day, she puts on her makeup and she puts on her jewellery and she puts on her clothes and everything matches. And she's quite capable of driving my sister and I mad if we go shopping for clothes with her to find the right colours and the right coordination and the right size. And because she was a pattern cutter and designer in her youth, she still has a sewing machine. And if something doesn't feel right, she'll adjust it a little until it does. She'll widen a collar, or she'll add a button, or she'll cut something a little bit shorter and put a slit in the side. She's so clever like that. But they're tiny, tiny adjustments that change the way it looks and feels when she's wearing it. And she was walking along the road one day and this young man came up to her and said, "You are so elegant and you look so stunning today. I had to stop and tell you." Honestly, it made her weak. She was so thrilled. She doesn't see herself as any of those things. But it really made me think. She very marvellously makes these tiny, tiny adjustments. And we can, and I know this from working with people for the last 30 years, about their bodies, about their movement, about their pains and aches and difficulties, and about their achievements, and about their freedom to move well, and what happens when their tissue is allowed to glide or that's facilitated. They feel $1 million when they've just achieved that lovely ease and grace. And sometimes I think we forget to tell ourselves how brilliant that is and how valuable that is. And so instead of having this courage to go to boot camp and do this army-based training where we all come out like the next step is going into the SAS, which is the kind of the standard kind of interpretation of challenge, I wonder if the more subtle aspects, the more magical aspects, the more super simple aspects, because some days it is a challenge to literally get up and make the bed or tidy the room or clear your table before you start doing anything, or make yourself a cup of tea and take the time to drink it. So one of my answers to why does MMIA make me feel better when I'm just doing a few movements a day is, I think you are remembering the simplicity of life when you were a child and you just moved to explore. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to have a cultural asset that makes you a veteran runner of the highest level for your age group. It doesn't need to be that. Sometimes it can be about the courage to simply challenge the belief of how we look at our bodies and how we be with them the way they are, and how we allow them to reveal their innate qualities, their innate ability to spring. I think that puts a spring in our step just because we attend to it. So that brings us to the third thing that I wanted to say, which is about care. And really, I'm talking about care of ourselves. And I have to admit, this is a challenge for me. I tend to be, I think it's called a workaholic. I get super excited about communicating things and putting them together when I see what a difference they make to people. I get completely inspired to make them available to everybody and challenge myself to do that, have the courage to do that, because believe me, it's either courageous or really daft. It's certainly not easy. And taking care, I've discovered that micro movements are magical in the sense that their magic extends beyond my intellectual thinking. So in my mind, after I was ill a couple of years ago, I figured, given that I know intellectually that fascia's half-life for transformation is 12 months and it can take 24 months to really transform it, that if I did a series of 12 minutes a day of micro movements every day, it would take me 12 months to recover and another 12 months to completely restore my well-being. And I gave myself 2 gifts. One was the gift of doing that every day for 12 minutes, and the other was writing down the responses and the achievements and creating a little graph of coloured hearts to show my progress. And I started at one heart that was red, the first colour of the rainbow, and the idea was that when I could do full weight bearing yoga after 2 quite intense surgeries, I would give myself 3 purple hearts. So each colour had 1 to 3 for its achievement on that level, and then each level was denoted by the next colour. And to my amazement, my absolute amazement, by taking that gentle 12 minutes a day micro movement care of myself, I was able to do full weight bearing yoga within 12 weeks. That fascinated me. And from there, I was having a conversation in the anatomy lab with Paul Thornley, and he was telling me how he has discovered a similar thing in a different way. And we put that together and created myofascial magic in action. And the book doesn't just reiterate my deep conviction that our bodies are not separate from the beings that we are. It doesn't just explain how fascia actually works in terms of its myofascial components and how we can optimize them. And it certainly isn't only about the science behind the research and how we know that fascia is the largest sensory organ of the body. All that's in there. What's actually the most magical for me, and this is my answer to the question, that your well-being has grown because being well aware of yourself in a place that isn't intellectual, that isn't about how far you've run, how much you've achieved. It's about being well in your own body, the architecture, the soft matter, physical architecture that you organized as an embryo. You micro move it. Very specific ways, very specific sequences, I grant you that. But you're working with the magic, which is your inner awareness. Because fascia's a sensory organ, because it's a feedback system, because its predisposition is finesse, it wants to receive the best and give the best back. Now think about it. When you yell at someone, very often they don't respond kindly. They yell back. Fascia's a bit like that. When you go to use a ball under your foot to ease foot pain or soften the tissue or be kind to yourself, I hear of people coming and going, oh, no, I'm using a golf ball or a cricket ball or a baseball because I need proper stuff for my tissue. My tissue's strong and I need to get in there. It doesn't work like that. The fascia hardens and resists at the level it needs to. So if you go in hard, it will respond hard. If you go in soft, it will softly respond and find its way. In other words, if you listen, you will hear what it has to say. And when you've worked with this for many decades with many thousands of people, you begin to be able to map a sort of archetypal somatic sequence, and you're able to kind of pick up what's best for one person and what another person might need a little more of. You naturally can put the map together in a very unique way for them because of your experience, because you've heard that many times before. But you don't go in with a rigid, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to achieve this, you've got to challenge yourself to this. Because that's just making them wrong and you right, or giving you the power over them. And it doesn't work like that. And why I think to the lovely, lovely participant in the course that asked me this, why I think MMIA makes you feel better when you're only doing a few movements a day, is the quality and the listening and the combined years of science and research behind the sequences that you're being given to use and choose from. They're not like replicable, cut and paste, do that again and again, no matter who you meet. Not at all. What you're being taught are the ingredients to make the right dish for that person so that you can become a movement mentor that works with others, giving them what they need. And you start with you. I don't think that's selfish. I think that's self-full, self-aware. And it's self-appropriate because your fascia is the tissue of your self-proprioception, same root as appropriate. What's right for me now? When you wake up in the morning, it's very different to when you're halfway through your morning, to lunchtime, to the afternoon when maybe there's a bit of a dip, to the early evening, to the weekend. There's a different quality, different, we could say, energetic quality. But I think that loving attention doesn't have to be soppy, doesn't have to be sloppy, and it doesn't necessarily have to be soft. Goodness knows, there's some really difficult, refined movements in MMIA. But they're not about challenging based on army-based boot camp recruitment foundations. How we've inherited that over the last 400 years is a story of how we've inherited biomechanics, as if we're made up of parts that can just be honed into machines and better machines. And that's not true. We're beings animating our bodies. Sometimes to the best of our ability, sometimes it's a challenge to find out what the best of our ability is. But somehow I think that this sense of well-being has grown from the sense of being well and listening to yourself before the challenge that you take on in everyday life, that you've given the body time to be itself the way that it is. And in fact, to finish up, the first law of spirit and spiritual science is acceptance of that which is. And I think that might be the foundation that brings us the possibility of a gentle challenge and a really kind of generous listening. It takes courage to do that. It's not our culture. And I offer it as an answer that it's not about me or the community or the positive thinking's infectious, because I'm not necessarily a positive thinker. I think it's about accepting the possibility, somewhat empathetically, that each person has their own reasons and they're very respected. It's an invitation to challenge themselves with kindness. I call that grace. And I think grace is magical. So I hope that answers the question, and I hope it makes sense, because in my world, that's what fascia is trying to do for us. Make sense of our sensing. God bless, lots of magic, and have a great day.